Automotive YouTube is going absolutely crazy right now. There's all these new channels popping up, and a lot of the more popular ones are getting their way because of quality, because of good narrative telling, because of good history, because of good coverage of news, because of good quality memes. By the way, I recommend all of these folks. I'm not going to link them simply because there's too many, but like if you just look at the recommended page, whichever way that is, there's some quality there, I promise it. So how is me, someone who just graduated past iMovie, literally with this video, gonna make it in this economy? I could do it by cool graphics, better quality production. I could do it by just being the best. But I'll tell you what, you're always the best if you're the first. And that's why today you're going to watch me innovate in making a new segment of Automotive YouTube. Today will be the first asterisk automotive alternate history video. AMC is still around. This, of course, being the brand is still around. But the thing about alternate history that's interesting is you kind of have to make it somewhat plausible because you have to back it up with an idea of how it's going to work. And so AMC as an independent company is dead. They have been bought out, just like in real life, where they were bought by Chrysler, turned into Eagle and Jeep. Jeep we know and love today. Eagle lasted about 10 years as like entry-level techno luxury brand, which I love, by the way. I love Eagles. I really want a couple of them, but it just wasn't AMC. They didn't have the raw, true, low-end, bottom of the barrel. As some of you may know, a little bit of real history, right before they were bought by Chrysler, AMC was very closely working with Renault to produce some Renault models in the US, such as the Alliance, such as the Le Car. Yeah, they never really took off. Americans just don't like French cars, I guess, in the sense of French branded cars. What I propose is this: Chrysler still buys Jeep because I don't want to deal with Jeep. They're cheap, whatever, they do their thing. Chrysler buys Jeep, but Renault buys AMC. And on top of that, Renault will also be buying the Brampton assembly. Now, of course, this is AMC's original factory in Canada. On Wikipedia, there's a very nice list, and I'll show it kind of here. I'll censor some of them because it's funny. There's a very nice list here of cars that were made by Chrysler at this Brampton assembly. And my thinking is this: I don't want it to just all be rebadged Renaults. I want AMC to continue to make some products, and what makes the most sense. What was built at this factory, which is like full-size Luxo barge American things, something that Renault obviously doesn't make themselves, so it makes perfect sense. And just as a fun canonical thing, anything that was made at the Brampton assembly by Chrysler, made exclusively there, either doesn't exist or it exists in a roundabout way, but maybe it's not exactly the same, because I'm just going to show these cars and pretend they're AMC models. I didn't have the time to bother, like, to reface them and stuff. A couple other things I want to get out of the way before we hop into the timeline here. If any name of a car confuses you, just assume it's something in AMC's history, a previous brand AMC owned, a previous AMC model, a reference to like car color they used to have. And also just one last little point for like half these cars, as we roll through the timeline, I'm going to say kind of how well they did market-wise. I just eyeballed it. I didn't do any market research. Well, I'm not that guy. No, do not assume that of me. So we start in 1986, which is the year of the purchase, January 1st. Why? I don't know. 3 cars, all of which were being produced in real life by AMC. The compact Renault Alliance / GTA, the midsize Renault Medallion, the compact crossover AMC wagon. And also, as a side note, I will be saying these car sizes in American-ish standards. You can convert to Euro if you want. Those 2 cars that were badged as Renaults are now rebadged AMCs because Renault finally figured out that no one in America wants a French badged car. Now, AMC still has this reputation at the time of, you know, how they are. So sales aren't really helped by the rebadging of these models. but this isn't an immediate failure. Like maybe Renault's still in debt from this procedure, maybe Chrysler helped, I don't know. Something, magic money appeared. Renault found oil. 1987 is the first time we get to check out the new Brampton assembly. For the AMC Premier, just the quick rundown, it's a very square, full-size, top-of-the-line sedan. And while it sells better than like the previous models they were selling, the American public is still kind of confused by this weird transitional point AMC's in right now. Of course, American owners being owned by French companies all over the news, which isn't really helping the reputation much. So right now it's still looking like not a super successful idea, but whatever, they're getting through it. By the way, the Premier will be massive in the future. So the Alliance and GTA are dead, and they are replaced by the first, like, completely fabricated thing, a rebadged version of the compact Renault 19 called the AMC Hornet. On top of this, AMC introduces a fully in-house performance variant of the AMC Hornet called the Hornet AMX. This car is by no means like a market segment champ, but a sleeker look and the performance variant does start to attract some of its old fans back, start to attract some new fans. So people are kind of looking at AMC and wondering if this Frenchness is going to be so bad. 1989, after a long and valiant service, the greatest car ever made, the AMC, is dead. Which, in our universe, the bad world, that is the last car AMC ever made. But of course, in this world, it's just the end of their crossover wagony thing. Sometimes wagony. They weren't all wagons. I don't know why I didn't know that till relatively recently, but they weren't all wagons. Skipping ahead to 1991, there are two major developments in this year. Looking to expand AMC's horizons in order to get some attention back to them, they introduced two new revolutionary products, the Alpine A610 sports car and the second-gen Renault Espace. One of them works out. So the AMC Alpine, as I've so cleverly called it, you would think would sell really well in the US because its 1991 sports cars are hot. This thing is foreign, it looks wavy and stuff. It was just a weird car. Like, it tried to compete with the 911, but like it just kind of didn't. Fun fact, this was the car, I think it has a warning on like the trunk lid or something. Don't drive this car in America. You're just not authorized to drive this car in America. Do not drive this car in America. And it's almost like implied, like it never directly states why, but it's like almost implied that like Americans can't drive. As an American, that's hilarious. I'm not saying whether it's true or not, I'm just saying it's hilarious. But on the other hand, the Renault Espace, the French minivan. So as I have decided to call it, the AMC Eagle Van, also known as the American Eagle Van, please tell me that that's not a good name. You can't, because it would be a false statement, was AMC's first real financial success since the purchase. And so they were really starting to take off at this point. Sliding doors, of course, they added that because America, you need sliding doors on a minivan. But on top of that, in order to try and get some more appeal and to try and give their new AMX department something more to do, there's an AMX variant of this. Did they sell well ever? No. But a lot of people are now looking at AMC going, you guys are making a performance minivan. You guys are making a performance minivan? And this isn't like entirely based in fiction either. Like there were performance versions of the Renault Espace. There was a F1 variant. Like it had an F1 engine in it. Thank you, France. And no, before you ask, there was no AMC Alpine AMX variant. That would have only made sense. The full-sized AMC Premier has been dyed and is replaced with the AMC Vision. Like in real life, the Eagle Vision didn't sell phenomenally, especially compared to some of its other Chrysler variants. The only thing people could really grasp about what this car was trying to be was mid-size. They didn't know if it was luxury, they didn't know if it was tech, they didn't know if it was basic for the family, they didn't know if it was performance. It kind of was just mid-size. And our first kind of not Eagle, like our first one that's just another Chrysler product, like a different one, is the first generation Chrysler LHS, which is the luxury full-size land yacht that Americans are so known for, which is the AMC Ambassador. It was a fantastically huge car that was very cushiony, very kind of luxurious, and was primarily bought by very confused old people. Also, most of the existing versions of it today are missing 2 doors. No more, no less. The last of our starting team has sadly passed today. The midsize AMC Medallion is replaced by the second gen AMC Medallion. This will be a rebadge of the first gen Renault Laguna. It is competitive in its market, especially as AMC is starting to get its reputation back and starting to kind of keep up with the times maybe more than they ever had. It's still, nothing special. Selling enough to guarantee a next generation when we get there. The AMC Alpine was not long for this world. It was simply too French. However, the compact AMC Hornet does get a second gen with the first gen Renault Megane. This also receives a second gen AMX variant and is another financial success for the company, as it immediately is seen as a somewhat comparable rival to the Civic. Now, this didn't last once people figured out the reliability of French cars, or American cars, even if it ended up being produced in America too, is not better. But still, many people saw it as a worthy contender of a solid compact car to buy in the mid-90s, especially the AMX variant. The AMX variant was very fun. The following year, both the full-sized Vision and the Eagle van get second generations. The Vision Mark II, now based on the Chrysler Concorde, because Eagle brand was in the process of being died at this point. It sold well in its market segment, but this was starting to get to the end. Luxury full-size and full-size vehicles, kind of in general in America. It'll pick up steam again, but sort of late 90s, people starting to really look at SUVs and minivans and minivans. Speaking of minivans, the second gen Eagle van continues its horrendous reign of terror, absolutely slam dunking sales for a second generation in a row, and even having a second generation of AMX, which also didn't sell the AMX variant, but little kids on the school block would always point to an Eagle van approaching and being like, "Whoa, does your mom have the car with the F1 engine?" And the other kid would go, "Yes." In 1998, the biggest boy, the AMC Ambassador, gets replaced with the second generation Chrysler LHS, which is an almost immediate sales flop. The first generation at least had some charm to it, but this thing is just ugly, fat, and has no friends. Every remaining example is missing 3 doors. No more, no less. There is a new entry in the subcompact market, and this of course being the AMC Spirit, based on the Renault Clio symbol, because this is when Renault finally turned the Clio into sedan sort of thing. So now this variant is in the US, the Clio symbol. Look at it, how it stands. Yeah, and the AMC Spirit does sell in some numbers. Being one of the cheapest cars in America at the time, probably does help sell some numbers, but again, it's nothing impressive. The midsize AMC Medallion now looks to be the first of any AMC vehicle since the French takeover to get its 3rd generation, despite just okay sales. And it gets that with the 2nd gen Laguna. This car also just has just okay sales. AMC also launched their first ever van. Ever. By the way, this would be their first van ever, I think. This, of course, being the AMC Road, which is based off the Renault Traffic. It's a van, it sells, because people need to do work or move a lot of people around, but it's not super competitive against its competition, at least at first. Maybe it picks up a bit more later. So after mostly fraudulent sales, the AMC Ambassador is dead with no replacement. On the flip side, AMC revamped both their fan favorite models. The Hornet gets its third generation with the second generation gone. It receives sharp lines. It is certainly one handsome gentleman. Once again receives an AMX variant. And while sales aren't quite as extraordinary in comparison to its market segment as the last generation, it still has a cult following. It's still sold well enough to be considered a success. Shook hands, pats on backs, whatever else. Speaking of shook hands, pats on backs, the AMC Eagle van gets its third generation with the fourth generation Espace. And remember that thing I said before about how some of the vehicles I would consider kind of failures because they were too French? This is one of them. Although this one wasn't an outright failure, it was too French. So, I mean, if you just look at it here, I said the crazy lines were looking cool on the Hornet. This one, you can make an argument one way or the other is how I'm going to put it. I don't see how, like, the rear window isn't long enough on this one, so I don't see how AMC could squeeze a rolling door back there, so I'm just going to say they don't for this one, which of course causes a massive sales flop because what is a minivan without the rolling door? The whole car's ruined. It's got a wing, I love that it has a wing, but I know for a fact the average person would not love the fact that it has a wing. And just overall, too French. And no AMX variant, that also didn't help. Now, the Eagle van already being a cult classic at this point, did help sell it continuously. And of course, minivan still being popular basically until like 2008-ish, did also help it sell, but it would have to wait a while before it receives a next generation. It will get one, but it'll take 13 years? 13 years. 2004, the full-sized AMC Vision has been off. Now, it does kind of have a replacement, kind of. Remember when I said some Brampton assembly products that were made canonically don't exist as Chryslers, but do exist here? This is called the AMC Premier Wagon because it's a lot more boxy now, and I figured, well, before they went from Premier to Vision, when the car went from boxy to curvy, so now it's kind of going back to boxy, let's just go back to Premier. Plus, it's also to signify like a change because, I mean, it's a weird wagony thing, it's different now. Remember how I said a staple of this video would be if it was exclusively made at the AMC assembly? Chrysler never made it, and canonically that just means it's an AMC product. So the AMC Premier, as you can see here, is a rebadge of the Dodge Charger. So this is the AMC Premier, and there is an AMX variant. Of course, the Hemi is the AMX now. It took that Premier wagon chassis and finally made it start shifting numbers. Now this has a more muscly look to take over the muscle revival inspired by the likes of the Ford Mustang coming back and maybe some concepts Chrysler showed. I'm not gonna pretend that they're like completely out of this. People are definitely ecstatic about this thing's design. After 9 years of valiant service, the subcompact AMC Spirit gets a second gen with the second gen Renault symbol. Or technically first gen because last gen was the Renault Clio symbol and this one's the Renault symbol, not whatever. Hitting right at the American housing crisis in 2008, many former homeowners find themselves shamefully picking up these bad boys. Being a cheap car, it wasn't very profitable per sale, but being that these were selling very well for a few years, meant that this was another huge financial success for AMC. However, this was not the only car they released in 2008. Do you remember, it was a while ago, I don't know if you'd remember. Do you remember when I said that a staple of this video might be, if it was made at the Brampton Assembly, the AMC Javelin debuted, too much fanfare. The AMC Javelin not only sold well enough alongside the new Spirit to help see both Renault and AMC through the 2008 financial crisis, but it and its AMX variant gained an immediate cult following, including to help promote the Premier Many around the world loved the AMC Javelin. Also, moving forward, the Hellcats are the AMX Javelin and the AMX Premier, kind of doing the same thing that Chrysler tried to do, where it was like, no, it's not Dodge, it's SRT. And also, the Demon is called the Machine. And also, I would just like to once again remind you that the funniest implication here is Dodge only made the Challenger at Brampton, which canonically means Dodge didn't make the Charger or the Challenger, which doesn't directly mean, but more than likely means Dodge is dead soon. So the Premier wagon is dead because the Premier don't need no wagon, because Americans don't understand what that's all about. I mean, Renault learned this a long time ago. I don't know why it took AMC so long to figure it out. And also the AMC Medallion is dead with no replacement, despite the fact that there is a following generation Renault Laguna. And you may have noticed something. All the other American auto brands had at least one or two SUVs by this point, if not more than that. But sort of the problem is especially for a lot of the early Renault SUVs, they were rebadged as Nissans in the US. And one of the other rules that I gave myself for this is that if it's rebadged in the US, or basically rebadged in the States already, that it can't be used. So of course the problem here, the reason that the Medallion is gone with no replacement, is because the next generation Renault Laguna shares a lot of parts and is not rebadged, but it kind of is rebadged, of that same generation Nissan Altima. And figured the Medallion might have been selling okay, but it's probably not better than the Altima. So, and I don't know the exact hierarchy of the R&M Alliance in 2009, but I have a feeling Nissan probably would have talked their way into, do not sell that into my market. We will sell the Altima and it will be good. Well, one new car this year is the AMC Hornet 4th generation. This favorite compact car is no longer based on the Megane. The main problem, as I stated before, is that there was no sedan variant of the Megane. Instead, Renault had a different offering called the Renault Fluence, which is a lot less interesting of a car, and it didn't have any performance variants, and I figured since AMX as like a division might also be more focused on the Premier and the Javelin at this point, that they might take a step back from the Hornet, especially because in this generation there is no wagon variant, therefore there is no hot hatch, therefore there is nothing to sell. So this is what a lot of people consider to be at least the most boring generation of Hornet. That's not to say that it sold bad. We'll actually get to a more interesting variant of this Hornet in a second. But at least at first value, many critics were disappointed. It did still sell, but they just took the fun out of it, man. 2010 would see a new face of the party. Their first SUV, the new subcompact crossover. 30 years after AMC invented the crossover, the bad boy, the AMC Summit, or you may recognize it as the Dacia Duster. And also, shout out Dacia, this is our first one. We're happy to welcome them into the AMC family. And you're probably wondering about that thing I said earlier about Nissan. So here's the thing. So the Nissan Juke right now is killing sales in the US, right? Absolutely, it's the Juke. Everyone loves the Juke. But here's the problem. The Dacia Duster was its own platform, meaning that maybe with some safety upgrades, Renault can give this one to AMC and Nissan can't say anything about it because it's different. It's not the Juke. It's a completely different thing. Same market segment as the Juke, but it's different. Now, despite being their first SUV, it is still a subcompact crossover from Romania. So a lot of people are kind of iffy on it at first. They maybe add some safety equipment to sell it in the US. Maybe, I don't know what Romania's safety rules are, but having an SUV in the year of our Lord 2010 is still a profitable venture. 2011, we get the next generation of the Premier, which I based on the 300 instead of the Charger because both exist in the same market segment. We're both only built at Brampton, but I don't know. For some reason, I thought the 300 made more sense in this context. Also, a massive apology to the Europeans out there. You guys don't get the Lancia Thema anymore because the 300 canonically is no Lancia Thema. Maybe it's sold in Europe as a Renault though. The Le Big. A new special edition of the Hornet came out this year in a collaboration effort with Renault. Now the two of them collaborated to make a joint division called ZE. Now this was to promote electric cars. So they made a couple cars together with this. Most of them didn't sell in the US, but one of them that did sell in the US was the Hornet ZE, the AMC Hornet ZE. Which means now AMC has an electric sedan in 2011. Right before Tesla Model S pops off and officially makes electric cars cool. This car sells past the lifespan of this generation of Hornet. It continues 5 years after this generation of Hornet because of its popularity, and much of its sales comes later on, 2015, 16, I would imagine. It's not an immediate success, but it gains a lot of respect, and people are like, whoa, this is technology in an AMC product. Advancement? What? And it gets even better the following year, because I've not even touched on the cooler ZE product that did sell in America yet. This, of course, being the subcompact AMC ZE, aren't I creative, based on the Renault Zoe. This one kind of does fall more into the category of your Nissan Leafs and your Kia EV Souls, of some of those real early electric cars that were the reasons the electric cars kind of had the stigma against them. A lot of people, in large part because of the Hornet ZE, looked at this as kind of a higher end product. So once again, this was another financial success for them. Again, maybe later on in 2012, maybe not so much. Maybe the people weren't buying these off the shelves in 2012, but you get to 15, 16 through 18, these did start pushing some numbers. Speaking of Dacia, which we just discussed in the last car, the subcompact AMC Spirit 3, which is a Renault symbol, which is itself just rebadged at this point, Dacia Logan. It would go on to sell in some numbers, but being that America is starting to crawl out of its financial crisis at this point, didn't sell quite as well as the last one. But, it's still got no, it doesn't have a fan base. It's a subcompact. It still existed. But if we follow that lineage further of the Renault symbol to the Dacia Logan, well, the Dacia Logan is basically just the sedan version of the Sandero. Now, if you raise the Sandero a little bit, you get this weird thing that existed called the Dacia Sandero Stepway, being another subcompact SUV that Nissan didn't have. AMC's now got its second subcompact SUV, which seems a little redundant, but A, Dacia rocked it, so whatever. And B, it's the Summit is boxy, and this one's more curvy, and this one is also literally just a lifted subcompact car, where the Summit's kind of its own model, so there's still a hierarchy there, I figured. But on top of that, the Spirit Vista sold even better than both the Spirit and the Summit. Many people liked its go anywhere look for a go anywhere price. 2014, we finally reached the second generation AMC Road. There it is. Look at it, how it stands. And of course, the AMC Open, which is based on the Renault Alaskan, which is itself a rebadge of the Nissan Navara, which might be a little confusing. Nissan had another full-size truck sold in America at the time called the Frontier. Now, why was this a different model than the Navara and the Frontier? First of all, it wasn't in previous generations, so why is it now? Great question. Both of these continue to be profitable, but nothing special. A lot of people buying trucks are kind of looking at this thing going, I can still smell the foreign on it. So that of course leads to an issue, but whatever. Some people still like that AMC has a truck. That's an alluring proposition to them weirdos personally. One other thing that I will mention is we have officially reached our first two vehicles that canonically in our little imaginary world that would still be on sale today. Very good. Can I get a round of applause, please? Keep it up, AMC Open and Road, although we'll see how much longer the Open's here considering Nissan's current existence. 2015, the compact AMC Hornet would return with its 5th generation, and it would return to the Megane, which of course does mean, especially because this is like mid-2010s, this is the hot hatch revival era, means to much fanfare the AMX variant returns. The AMX variant and this generation of Hornet are on sale to this day. In this sense, it kind of has a replacement, an electric replacement that's also a replacement to the Hornet ZE. We'll get there, but still runs on sale alongside of it, at least for now. It's implied that it'll be out of sale soon, so buy them while you can. Returning to the table is the AMC midsize sedan, no longer directly rebadged with the Nissan Altima, but of course AMC cannot celebrate the return of this vehicle by simply naming it the Medallion again. Now this here that we see is the AMC Matador. Sales are not good though. I mean, just mid-sized cars aren't doing that hot right now. It looks cool, but it's, you know, whatever. Yesterday's news, man. But if you ask me, the real crime, that there was never an AMX variant. They just didn't make one. On top of this, the Eagle van also gets a next generation. Well, it's slipping behind in the minivan segment, and the minivan segment is slipping behind in terms of existence. It's not a stretch to say that this didn't sell that crazy, but you could tell as well that they were trying to start to market this as kind of just an SUV thing, less so than a minivan. So that kind of helped. The last car that they showed off this year though is the AMC Summit pickup. That's right, there's another pickup truck. Now this thing is the subcompact AMC Summit you may recognize, but AMC figured, you know, let's just put a bet on it, because why not? But this one was a bit more of a success, more so than the Summit. Revolutionized a market segment. Sold in fantastic numbers, many other car companies immediately tried to follow in its path of making small pickup trucks. This, of course, you could see the Hyundai Santa Cruz, the Ford Maverick, and many others, meaning that this car to this day sells fantastically with not even a new generation, just some minor facelifts here and there. And it just does great. It just is great. We all love the Summit pickup. Alpine has risen from the dead in Europe, which means it is time for it to rise from the dead in America too. Unlike last time, however, Renault expresses interest in having Alpine as a second brand in the US to run alongside AMC. But they do still wish to use AMC dealer networks and AMC factories if such a thing exists. AMC and Renault agreed that this car will sell in the US as the Alpine Interlagos, because Americans can't count to 10, A, and B, cool history reference. Shout out to anyone that gets to why I named it the Interlagos. But as part of the compromise, all variants of this car are managed through and labeled Alpine Interlagos AMX in America, meaning that AMC still gets to promote the car somewhat as part of their family because they slap the AMX name onto the end. It sells enough to justify keeping it selling. But is it Americans' first choice over a 911? Unlike the previous one, no, Americans still prefer the 911 or a Corvette. But unlike the last one where it was probably not even marketed sometimes, this one is like, yeah, it's in the discussion. It's on the it's at the table. Now 2019, AMC Spirit Vista is directly replaced by the second generation Renault Capture. Also at this point, Renault stopped sharing platforms except the Juke, but the Juke was out of sale in the US by this point. We're gonna start seeing a lot more SUVs crop up like over the next couple of years because they just stopped sharing stuff with Nissan, and I don't know the politics there. Don't ask me such things. But either way, the new name given to the subcompact crossover SUV is the AMC Nash, which is a good market competitor in the same way that the Spirit Vista was, allowing it to sell to this day. Fittingly, there's a new AMC called the Nash. There must be a new AMC called the Hudson. And so the next step up, based on the Renault Arcana, and being more or less just the extended wheelbase version of the Nash/Capture, is the AMC Hudson. However, this one kind of drowns in its segment a bit more. Compact crossover SUVs are going absolutely ballistic in the US right now, so it doesn't make as big of a splash as its smaller brother, the Nash. In 2020, we all know the COVID-19 pandemic hit and pushed many of AMC's plans back, such as the previously mentioned successor to the Hornet ZE, meaning that the Hornet ZE went out of production without its direct successor. This leaves AMC in a seemingly odd position where just a few minutes ago, like, everyone was praising them for being super ahead of electric technology just as it was getting going. But now 2020 is here, and now brands are really starting to kind of get into it. A lot of other versions are releasing. I think this is right when the Mach-E came out. I think this is right when the Hummer EV and Bolt came out. I think this is when the Honda E came out. But it seems like now they're kind of lagging behind. But don't worry. They're gonna have like 5 EVs in the next couple of years. In 2021, the AMC Spirit gets its 4th generation with the modern Dacia Logan. At this point, cheap cars have become incredibly unprofitable due to various reasons, especially in the US. But however, a straight up lack of competition at this point means that the 4th generation still sees increased spirits every year following 2021. Like 2025 will still probably be its best year selling, simply because probably at this point it's the cheapest new car in the US. And I don't know if it would have been super realistic to kind of keep it there, and by no means am I saying it's a good car, not dogging any fans of the Dacia Logan / Sandero out there, but yeah, I mean, in 2022, the war in Ukraine had massive implications on the automotive industry, including but not limited to the Renault Arcana, which those of you will remember the AMC Hudson was based upon, was not helped by the fact that the 3 places Renault chose to construct this vehicle were Ukraine, Russia, and Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan probably would have continued to be fine, but I mean, this just made it logistically hard. The compact crossover we all know and love, the AMC Hudson, got a 2nd generation before it was really due. This, of course, being switched to being based on the Renault Austral, which had the added bonus of a more muscular, squared-off look, which was more ahead of the times, and actually directly led to some better sales, which was, definitely Renault was like, cool, that's why we did that. Yep, because it was better sales. That's why we gave it a 2nd generation just 3 years into production. That's why we did that. But this is not the only new car this year. The successor to the Hornet ZE is here. This, of course, being the electric variant of the Hornet, the Horn. This is how they chose to spell it. Now, of course, they just removed the T and made the E blue. But if you put this into Google Translate and tell it to say it back to you, it says horn. This thing has been a financial success, by the way, due to some weird marketing tactic that I guess I don't fully understand. But, I mean, it seems to have an instant cult following from just, I don't know, I don't get it. It's the horn, that's how you pronounce it, it's the horn. 2023, as expected, this is the last year of both the mid-size Matador and the second to last year of the AMC Eagle van. Of course, it is replaced by the new mid-size crossover AMC Eagle. This, of course, being still based on the Renault Espace, which itself kind of just morphed into an SUV at this point, making the transition easier for both brands and giving them an easy out not only into a mid-size crossover, but also an easy out of the minivan market segment, which is just kind of all around a good move. 2024, the death of the Charger and the Challenger in real life is tragic enough, especially considering it's the end of the V8s and maybe it's the end of the tall deck AMC V8s as well. But the real issue here, this is the end of production at the Brampton assembly, which means starting in 2024, every car in the American Motors Corporation lineup is a rebadged from somewhere else. Now this probably starts an immediate firestorm on Twitter. People mad, people defending them. It's this whole thing. Everyone's talking about it in the automotive segment. American Motors doesn't make American cars anymore. Ignore the fact that Brampton is in Canada. Doesn't matter. Anyways, that's the end of my monologue. There's a replacement to the AMC ZE this year, and it's called the Le-Car. Look at it, guys. This didn't help the Twitter thing. New electric subcompact called the AMC Le-Car. Of course, a reference to the Renault Le-Car. But yes, based on the Renault 5 E-Tech. Very cool. Thank you, Le-Car. Now, on top of this, to run alongside the Eagle is the new mid-size crossover electric AMC Rambler. Of course, based off the Renault I looked this up earlier and I forgot, and I'm not going to look it up again. And of course, in 2025, the AMC Summit returns as the new electric squared off thingy. And we reach our conclusion. In the year 2025, there are 12 AMC models in production for the US market, plus one Alpine. But of those 12, 9 are based on Renaults, 2 are Dacias, and 1 is a Nissan. For now, again, we'll see about how long the Nissan sticks around. So here's some final thoughts. 1, I imagine one immediate complaint is that I didn't throw some extra fun stuff in here. But I kind of wanted to make this, again, as I said at the very beginning, realistic. That's why there was never showing of the Renault Aventine. That's why I never brought back the Gremlin or Pacer names, because as cool as those are, those probably still have some sort of mud slung on them. Maybe in concept form, probably in concept form a couple times, but still nothing to write home about. I didn't make any trims for cars or engines beyond the AMXs. Feel free to do that in the comments. Love to see some of that. But yeah, also let me know any other reasonable changes you might have made to the lineup. You know, I'm open to criticism. And I guess just a closing thought, there's no way AMC's existence in 2012 would not have had some implication on the 2012 presidential election. Hello, and welcome to the Final Thoughts Unscripted section of the video. You're probably going, wait, you just said you had final thoughts and now you have more final thoughts? Yeah, well, this is the post-editing month and a half after I recorded saying final thoughts originally that I have more final thoughts. So, in other words, the video is 2 times removed over. You can leave if you want to stop hearing me rambling. There's nothing super interesting past this point. Just a couple other thoughts. 1, an explanation I was originally going to put into the video, but ended up cutting, so I'll put it here, is why the AMC truck is called the Open and the AMC van is called the Road. So originally the AMC Road was going to be called the AMC Traffic, because why would they bother changing the name? That just seems like overstepping it. So the name was the AMC Traffic for a little while until I got time to do the truck. And then when I did the truck, it became the AMC Open, because what's the opposite of a traffic? Well, it's open road. But then I thought, and also it's the van's enclosed, so the Open is open truck, open bed. So the van, I'm sorry, but then I thought, who in America, or really any English speaker, would want to drive a car called the Traffic even if it is a van? And so that's why that became the AMC Road. Because also just the Road sounds like a good name for a van. Something super basic, like so basic no one would have even ever thought of it. A car called the Road. Wow. It's your road on the road. That's probably the advertising tagline. Speaking of advertising tagline, I mentioned that this video was recorded, not even talking about the writing, was recorded like a month and a half ago. A couple days ago, I had the epiphany of AM General was a thing that existed. For those of you that don't know, AM General was a American Motors original government contracting division that has made a myriad of things for the military and whatnot, military-industrial complex gang. AM General has been long a member of that. But they've also contracted some cars. They made the Mercedes-Benz minivan. They also made those weird taxi things you might see in like major cities in the US sometimes, that were meant to be like wheelchair accessible fleet vehicles, but then every cab company kind of just preferred lifted Toyota Siennas over those things, but you still see them around sometimes. I'll show a picture so you know what I'm talking about. But they also made the Hummer. Or they started with the Humvee, then they made the first generation Hummer before selling it to General Motors. So my probably biggest failure off the bat, I can just straight up tell you from this video, is that I didn't include the American Hummer. The American Motors Hummer should have been in there, but I don't know. I will just apologize and move on for that one. I guess the only other thing I will say is like that maybe they just wouldn't have seen it as a profitable idea, I guess. I don't know, because the story of the Hummer is already kind of weird. It's more or less just Arnold Schwarzenegger goes to AM General and says, I want a Humvee with leather seats, and they go, okay. And then they build them one with leather seats, and then it sold way better than they expected. Is the general gist of the lore of Hummer, if you didn't know. But enough about the lore of Hummer. So that's all for the video. Basically, hope you enjoyed it. Some general channel updates. So this is the 5th video originally released on this channel, but it's about to be the 3rd, because I'm still gonna leave the car spotting in Europe video up because I'm genuinely proud of it, and I'm gonna leave the Jaguar video up as a defiant statement. But I am temporarily unlisting and playlisting, so you can still watch them if you want, the awards video and the insulting car brands video. Reason being is I have somewhat decided that I am going to be, not immediately, potentially not even soon, but at some point here, opening 2 additional channels to this channel. One is just going to be pretty straightforward. It's just going to be the podcast. New episode out, by the way, on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts except for YouTube. We talk about the tariffs and what each brand in the world is directly responding to it. Car and Driver did a very nice compilation of that for me, and I read that out among some other stories from this past week. Highly recommend, go check that out, of all the car brands responding to the tariffs. But yeah, so a podcast channel, and then also I'm thinking, again, this is not something that's going to immediately take effect. My life is a little too chaotic right now, but hopefully if things settle down a little bit, I would like to start like a short form channel or like a lower quality channel, which is where I would probably put the insulting car brands video on. And the idea with that one would be kind of just like 5 to 10 minute goofs and gaffs I can get out once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks. Would be sort of my dream there. But yeah, so that was pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. If you have any other ideas or even want to see more alternative automotive history, please let me know. I'm already kind of committed to doing the next one, and I've already started making the cars in automation. Look, I'm putting more effort into the next one. Wow. But yes, I've already started to commit to that. But if you have any other ideas or want to see this more in the future, let me know. Consider subscribing and liking. It helps the algorithm. It also helps you see my videos. Even if you don't ever look in the subscribe page, it'll recommend me to you more. And also, just if you've actually made it to this point, like from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Even if there's like only 1 to 3 of you that have made it this far in, which is probably pretty likely, to you 1 to 3 people, thank you, and have a good night.